In Luthier, players take on the role of artisan families building instruments for performers and patrons. You're going to be travelling to the market to buy materials like metal, wood, and hair before constructing music out of them in your own personal workshop. A friend of mine made a hurdy-gurdy once, so how hard could it be? And once you've built them, these instruments will be held by professional players in the orchestra, earning you prestige. But prestige isn't gonna feed your hungry family, is it? They need prime. Earning your keep could be as simple as picking up a couple of repair jobs or fumbling a performance. But what you really want is patronage. If you get Vivaldi or Mozart or, God forbid, Schubert on board, Schubert, then you will be booned out the wazoo. That's right. Booned out the wazoo. Showered with money and apprentices and inspiration and discounts on hair, stuffed full of prestige. But these financial friends are needy, requiring a constant supply of new instruments lest they get bored, wander away, and take all of their precious points with them. And that is Luthier's core loop. You get ideas for instruments, you gather the resources to build them, and doing so will get you some endgame orchestral scoring. All the while, you are keeping your burgeoning loot business afloat by taking on odd jobs and keeping Mech happy. Now this is all contained in a kind of twisty version of the worker placement game, because your artisan family is represented by this stack of discs. Discs that you send out to the different board locations one at a time, and then each location is resolved one at a time, with the twist being that the order of resolution is determined by the players. So whilst I might want to do A, then C, then D, because the other players around the table have a say in the matter, now we're doing D, then A, then C. And now I'm making a Daokian. What the hell is even that? Not only is the order important, but it's of course the highest numbered worker that gets priority in picking instruments, patrons, repairs, whatever. Now getting that first pick might not seem like the be-all and end-all. Instead of making a natural trumpet, I'm making a theorbo, I guess. But these higher spaces, which are often left for the latecomers, will charge you extortionate prices for the rights to conceptualize an oboe. So it's important to be in the right place at the right time, but it's equally important to have each of these spaces resolved in the order you want them resolved in. In theory. We'll come back to that a little later. And I'm oversimplifying here, of course I am, because there's loads more going on in this game. You've got helpful bonuses for sending out your very best workers, as well as opportunities to upgrade those workers to specialists with unique abilities. You've got royal patrons, you've got unique instruments, you've got races to score certain criteria, and if you're rocking the deluxe edition of Luthier, you've got a pipe organ dice tower. But what Luthier is at its core is the kind of expansive puzzle that we've played many times over the years at Shut Up and Sit Down. The kind of game where you turn 1 cube into 2 cubes, into 5 cubes, into points. Points that will line the edge of an absolutely massive board. A whopping 3x7 reference pairs. And so with all that in mind, what makes this one stand out from the pack? If it wasn't obvious from the start, I'm a real fan of a game with a unique theme, and becoming a luthier for 3 hours on a Tuesday evening, it really pushes my buttons. Mechanically, these instruments and the patrons that receive them are just simple contract fulfillment. Get this many cubes, get this payout in points and prizes. But reframing those simple contracts as instruments and patrons does a lot of heavy lifting. It's playful going to market to stock up on cheap wood so you can construct a beautiful clarinet that you're gonna gift to Brahms. It's funny when you perform for the Queen and roll so badly that you squeak out utter nonsense. And Vincent Dutrait's artwork is, of course, as saturated and ornate as ever, smothering this game in Baroque detail that pops. Combine that with heaps of writing about the particular instruments and composers featured in the game, plus a lovingly put together learn to play guide and a soundtrack to put on while you play? The soundtrack does only last for 40 minutes though, so you will need to fill the rest of the time with something else. I tend to impress my guests on the old trusty harmonica. But all of this stuff builds into something that's a really inviting package, right? You've got a great hook, you've got great presentation, and you've got a game that offers that big game feeling in a rule set that isn't tremendously daunting. Because yes, of course, there's detail and finesse within all of these systems, but the core is very straightforward. You place workers, and then you resolve workers, with most anything you gain in that process being somehow useful to you, with the skill differential being working out how useful. And weirdly enough, one of the things that I think makes this game feel as learnable and achievable as it does is this conductor's baton. I think the base game comes with a cardboard version, and I got sent this slightly deluxified plastic one. But either way, I initially considered this thing to be a ridiculous tchotchke, the kind of pointless chrome that we would usually rally against. And to be fair, most of the optional add-ons to pimp your copy of Luthier do fit in that category. That jingly-jangly dice tower we talked about earlier, there's dedicated screen-printed instrument pieces, and there's a frankly ridiculous neoprene playing mat, which is this wide and this long? It is almost exactly the same size as my entire table. Madness. $280 of madness. But the more times that I taught this thing to new groups, the more and more I found this particular bit of pointless chrome to be strangely inspired. The closest thing to a universal skill in teaching board games is the ability to focus attention, to cut out the noise of a big board and zoom in on just the element we need to look at now. And wouldn't you know it, the conductor's baton has been doing that work since the 1800s. And it does it here too. This silly thing isn't just a fun thematic prop to wave around, though it is that quite a bit, but it also facilitates the teaching experience in a way that is quietly transformative. It's such a natural extension of the arm with a commanding presence, able to point out details with specificity and precision, the thin plastic click of it hitting the table eliciting an almost Pavlovian response in your audience. It fits so organically into Luthia, an on-theme prop to draw people into the world of the game, but also a teaching tool that echoes its real-world function. It is not pointless at all. It literally has a point.
Bombs.
Whilst I find Luthier to be gorgeous, approachable, and lovingly themed, I find the game underneath to be pretty good. There's nothing I can point to in Luthier that feels unwieldy or clunky or extraneous. No way, this whole box is eel smooth. And for some, that's a really good thing, but for me, I like a slightly more gnarled and wobbly surface to play upon. And these worker discs are maybe the prime example of what kind of a game Luthier is, because they never felt that sharp. The main board has plenty of different spaces to visit, and you're often deploying one or sometimes two workers to your own personal private player board. So especially on early rounds when you have just 3 workers to play with, most often people just get on with their own little plans. And in the moments where clashes do actually happen, you're often trading the best thing for a slightly less than ideal thing. It's very rare that you'll get intentionally blocked or bullied. In most of my games of Luthier, people simply wanted different things from the card row, and in the situations where they wanted the same thing, there were other good options available. But the order of resolution is what really matters, right? Not really? Because very few spaces on this board actually care about the order in which they are resolved. And the process of getting materials and using them to make your instruments, which is the core point generator in this game, that's a process that you drive your own tempo of, completely free of meddling. What I'm saying is that the cases in which this system really matters are quite niche. There are times in which it's a mild stumbling block or inconvenience, but the system never really bares its teeth. And this floatiness is present in a lot of other systems. Managing the patrons is very forgiving. There's plenty of ways to appease each one that are perennially available. The wavering market prices for these goods in between rounds don't feel that exploitable or impactful, given that you're so limited on storage and almost immediately putting the materials you do have into point-scoring instruments. I'm not even that sold on the first chair scoring in the center of the board. Each of these spaces corresponds to instrument cards that you can find in the deck, but in my experience, once you've secured the card for an instrument, it's very rare that someone else is going to offer up competition. It's just not realistic to obtain the card, secure the resources, and build the instrument before someone else snaffles up the scoring. And this is often my problem with these expansive, table-filling Euro games. They have a whole bunch of different, very well-intentioned systems, but they end up with a lack of focus. Luthier uses its worker placement mechanics to facilitate a game happening on the table, but it doesn't use those mechanics to elicit a particular feeling in its players. Even within Luthier, the patrons actually offer a better example of a deliberately deployed mechanic. Their ticking down timer and checklist of needs can push greedy players into real binds, where they're worried or relieved or annoyed. But the surrounding game feels less intentional for this particular setting. I think the game might have gotten away with this if the cards had a bunch more personality. But as soon as game 2, I was a fiend for iconography. What instrument am I making? It doesn't matter if it ticks the boxes. Who am I making it for? Doesn't matter either. They're getting me cheaper hair. I feel like Luthier could keep its slightly staid bones if they dialed it up to 11 on making these instruments exciting to make and these patrons more particular to please. There's a world in which these markets are more exciting and varied and fought for when there's more comboable variety amongst these cards. But as it stands, it's fun enough to make a serpent or get Schumann on board, but they're not memorable beyond that immediate referential punch because their effects are so expected. For me at least, I'm always asking the question of how does this cardboard make my friends feel? And honestly, it makes them feel alright. It makes them feel busy. It offers a long afternoon of contented, puzzly silence. But what's actually happening in this game? I can't really tell you the story of any of my games of Luthier, especially not in terms of who affected who. I don't know what I feel about Luthier after playing it, aside from a sense of vague satisfaction. And don't get me wrong, I think this is a piece of robust design work. It is a clean bit of machinery. I just feel like it lacks a mechanical personality, and that personality often arises from a few sharper edges. All of this might come across as me being mad at water for being wet, and it is fair enough to say that I probably shouldn't have gone into Luthier expecting something more prickly. I guess I'm just expressing my personal preference that these kinds of large, chunky, evening-filling games have a little bit more bite to them.